Hello booktube. I've got 10 books to tell you about in this little update. This is the first of the chattier, less scripted, more laid back updates. So let me know if you prefer these or if you prefer the other ones. I've got 10 books. I've got no DNFs. I read 10 books without DNFing one. I've read a couple of really good books. But before I talk about the books, I'm going to tell you just a couple of silly little things that have happened in my life in the last fortnight. Now, Bryn, my Staffordshire Terrier, he has got some skin diseases, some skin allergies rather, and he scratches them and then he gets infected and he has to go to the vet and he has to get antibiotics. The antibiotics he has been given has made his digestive system a little bit compromised. And I have learned that my dog has the ability to fart very loudly like a person. And there has been multiple times throughout the last fortnight where I have been in the room with Nell and one of us has accused the other one of letting off a mighty trombone, and it has been the dog. And this was it came to its highlight this morning when I'm like, oh, Bryn, why did you do this? And Nell's like, well, you joined him. You were in symphony with him. And I'm like, no, that was only one person, one animal farting. It was not me. I did not join in.
Lies!
Lies. Does anybody else have a heckler when they're filming? This has been just the topic of very lowbrow humour in the Gunpowder household for the last month. Also, on a really annoying note, I got banned from Facebook. I don't use Facebook very much, and apparently I won't be using it again. I got hacked by somebody who, I don't know what they were doing. Hacker. They did whatever they wanted to do, and they did not want me to have access. So they posted some hardcore pornography. And this all happened while I was asleep, and the next day I I'll just check the news and stuff, which is what I used Facebook for, and then it's like, you've been banned. Do you wish to contest this? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, you were banned for pornography. We'll let you know if it was pornography. And I'm like, it's not really how you should be. I'm not disputing that you can tell whether something's pornographic or not, Facebook. There is no appeal process that allows you to talk to a person and say, hey, I was hacked. You can report that you were hacked, but you need an active account to do that. And once they suspend your account, you can't do that. You can only challenge why you were suspended. Once they review why you're suspended, that's it. So if you're on Facebook and you're using it to store photos and stuff, I really back it up somewhere. Get yourself a hard drive, because this is actually a thing. Hackers do this all the time. They're trying to get your credit card details attached to your Facebook. That is enough blah blah blah. Let's talk about the books. The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan. This is the story of Frida, who is a single mother. She started off as not a single mother, but her husband was like, I want to keep my mistress. And she was like, I don't want you to keep your mistress. And he's like, fine, I'm leaving. Which does seem like a bit of douchey timing. She's looking after this baby on her own, and she's just having a bad day, and she wants to go out for a coffee, and then she needs to go into work, and she leaves the kid alone for 3 hours, and she gets back and the kid's screaming and the diaper's full and there are cops there, and she has been reported as a negligent mother, and they take her baby away from her and send her to this prison school thing. It's a thinly veiled metaphor. It then tries to educate her on things that mothers would like and tries to show her how to be a good mother, but it doesn't really give her any consideration. I think that this book is really arguing for the lack of consideration as a human that mothers get, and it's inherently very feminist. It's not really that well executed. It was the minimum level I'm happy to read. I think it's really sitting around that 3-star mark. I enjoyed my time with it. Do I really recommend it? Not really. The least good a book can be for me to be happy to read it. That is the glowing recommendation I give. All This Could Be Different by Sarah Tackham Matthews. This is a novel about a young woman living in the United States, and her parents are back in India. They brought her over, but they got deported, left their daughter there, who is living in America perfectly legally and even has a relatively good job. And then this sort of goes through some of her relationships. She is gay and is meeting various women, and she has this friendship with this woman named Tig, which is actually really lovely. I really liked that friendship. And there's this one scene where Tig is staying the night and she is creeping into the bed with her, and you're like, oh, this is a bit, what's going on here? Is this consensual? And then Tig's like, your heater's busted. We're going to have to fix that in the morning. In the meantime, can I just sleep in with you where it's warmer? And this, for me, was what the book was really about. This woman felt so incapable of advocating for herself because of all the various connecting pressures on her life. If she advocated to her landlord to get the heating fixed up, her landlord was also a client of her boss, and she was only living there because her boss got her to live there. You know, everything was very entangled in her life. Really, what was entangled was her living situation and her job. And I think that this is a really cool metaphor for the world, because if you want to talk about the two things that exploit people, particularly people of minorities, we're talking about just day-to-day sort of stuff. We're not talking about horrible events that can change a life. I think that your employment and your living situation are those things. I don't think there's enough literature that talks about the exploitation of people, young people, trying to get into the property market at the expense of landlords who really are bourgeois, money-hungry dick pigs. Legitimately being a landlord that's just exploitation of people. And I know that's an unpopular opinion, by the way. I know that there will be people out there who have investment houses, and, you know, like, honestly, if I had the money, I'd probably have an investment house too, because it is actually the intelligent thing to do. Ooh, coffee. Thank you, wife.
You're welcome, husband.
This is the best thing about filming early in the morning. Coffee. Everybody else does their Friday reads with drinks. I am doing it with caffeine. And this woman goes from this really quite strong and stable position to, in a matter of months, via being exploited, quite illegally, by the way, to being very precarious. And she has to make these choices about her life. It's a novel about friendship. It really centers queer brown women from sort of India, and I think it's really speaking to a minority of people, and I think it's wonderful. I think this is for want of a well-trodden cliche, this is the Sally Rooney of lesbian Indian Americans. I'd probably give about a 4-star. I thought it was quite well done. I enjoyed my time with it. I think that the writing could have been a little bit more emotionally evocative, but I felt that the characters were very easy to empathize with. I think that some readers would very much struggle to understand the motives of this woman, but her inaction on things was quite understandable, and needing to have friends to help her through. I thought that was a fantastic metaphor. I thought that was very fitting with her character as well. And I think this is one of these cool books where everything that's happening is quite metaphorical for a certain subsection of society, but that also quite fits with this character who is not being paid, whose landlord is refusing to fix the heating, who is really in what should be quite a strong position, is not. And this book is socialist as fuck, which is always good. My first 5-star read is An Olive Grove in Ends by Moses Mackenzie. This is about a young boy who is, you see him at a couple of stages of his life between high school and sort of early 20s. He's black. He's living around the Bristol area or Gloucestershire area in what sounds like quite a low socio-economic community called Ends. And his family is very caught up in the drug trade there, and that's sort of where he is expected to go. His dad, however, is a minister, and he left his son with his mother to raise in this drug-affected family, and then he falls in love with a girl, and her father is also a minister. What we then have is she is very much the reason he doesn't want to sell drugs anymore, but he also feels pressure to make money and to improve his life, and the only way he can see to do that is through drugs, and all of his family sell drugs, so he's very drawn back in. The girl he loves, her father knows that he sells drugs and knows the violent acts that he does, and he puts pressure on him to not do them. Through all of this, we sort of get this like idea of all the various pressures on this young man. His best friend and his cousin is literally killing people, and he feels the need to protect him, but at the same time that's like hella drug dealery, and he wants to walk away from that. I just thought that this was a fantastic portrait of a young man. These books about gangs and about drugs and about that sort of stuff really often focus a lot on the violence of those situations, because I think that a lot of people find the violence around that shocking, and you sort of read about it and you end up with that numb feeling because, oh yeah, they're killing people again. Yeah, they're doing some other form of horrible torture that is different, but basically about the same level as horrible as the last form of torture. And this book really shies away from that. It uses violence very impactfully, and the violence, while you know exactly what's happened, it's not graphically depicted, because this is really a story about a man and his life and the pressures on his life, and whether he's going to be able to make something better of himself, or whether he's going to be trapped in this horrible world. This is just it's a character portrait. It's very, very well done. I can see the motivations. I can feel the emotions and the conflicting emotions, and how that would paralyze somebody. This is just an excellent, excellent book. I give it 5 stars. This is one of the best books I have read all year. One of my favourite classics ever is The Ragged Trousered Philanthropists by Robert Tressel. And when I went to my local library, I noticed that they had a graphic novel adaptation of this book. And one of the things I would like to do is read more graphic novels. I thought it's often interesting to see how different formats treat some of your favourite books. It's a book that I want to do a full review on. I'm going to say something really horrible about it. I think that this is the left-wing Ayn Rand. This is Atlas Shrugged for lefties. A book that is really just about socialism. There is a plot to it, but really it's completely unnecessary and just a fictional structure for the arguments of socialism, and a chance to take apart the arguments against socialism. I think is very well argued. I definitely enjoy books that reflect my opinions sometimes. It makes me feel like I'm not the only one going, we need socialism. But obviously socialism is awesome. If you don't think socialism is awesome, you probably don't understand it. And maybe you should read this book to see the arguments. In the graphic novel version, the arguments are cut back. Everything is cut back. I'm not really sure that this was the right book to turn into a graphic novel. I think that I feel like a graphic novel lends itself to something a little bit more plotty. I just feel like this was the wrong choice. I still enjoyed it. I still liked it. I'm very glad it's out there. I hope people pick it up. I will say that it is abridged and it is cut back, and Robert Tressel does talk a lot, so there is definitely a market for it. I absolutely love this book as a standalone book. It's just very intelligent, but to sort of contradict a lot of what I've said lately, this is definitely a book that didn't need to be a novel. All of My Rage, Saber Tahir. This is a really fantastic novel. and you should ignore my little gripes with it. This is very well done. I'm going to tell you what it's about, and if you like that, you're going to like this book. This is the story of two students who are in their final year of school. They're both Pakistani. They have a complex friendship which is heading towards romance. The girl is an orphan who has been raised by her abusive uncle. The boy's grandmother has just died. His father is an addict and cannot deal with the day-to-day life. He inherits his grandmother's business, which is heavily in debt. He also has this weird thing about closeness, about people touching him, and she is desperately in love with him. So Sal, the boy, gets into drug dealing as a way to get himself out of the debt that he has inherited. Noor is applying to universities. She gets fantastic marks and she's applied to all of these brilliant universities. But her uncle, who is raising her, doesn't want her to go to university. He wants her to work in his bottle-o, his alcohol shop. His bottle-o might be a very Australian term. His off-license shop that sells booze. Now, Noor can't work in the shop. She's too young. That doesn't stop him from making her do it. And she sort of feels the pressure of, well, what if the cops come in here? We also have this just like over-the-top Islamophobia and racism in this book. And I say over-the-top, it's not over-the-top. The normal amount of Islamophobia that somebody experiences, but it's just sort of feels unrelenting, and it's so stupid. It's so stupid. I know it exists, but I really struggled to understand what the bullies were doing, what they were getting out of this. And this is accurate to me in real life. I'm like, why do you give a damn about Muslims doing their Muslimy things, eating falafels and praying to Mecca? And I probably shouldn't try to condense an entire culture down to a handful of things. So what if they do a couple of things that you don't do that's different? I mean, falafels are delicious. Everybody should eat falafels. They're just awesome, especially as a vegan. Anyway, distracted. It just didn't quite stick together for me, and I keep thinking about it, and I'm like, the characterization is good, the plot is interesting, the writing is emotional and evocative, the themes are big and strong. I logically should be just raving about this book, 5 stars, best thing I've read all year, but I don't know why it didn't quite work for me. I'd love to know if you've read this book. I don't think that many people have read this book yet. It's quite new out. But I'd love to know if you've read it. Did it just, like, was it as amazing as the author is clearly talented? Or was there something lacking for you? Like, I don't know what it is, because everything that I think I like in a book, it did well. My emotions don't match to what I think they should match. And I don't know why. Tell me why. I read Saha by Cho Nam-ju. Cho Nam-ju, if that name rings a bell, is Kim Ji-yeon, born 1982. That super feminist Korean novel. This is a book about a community on the outskirts of this country called Town. I love that the country is called Town. I don't know if that is a quirk of translation or if that is just a clever bit of a clever literary device. I'm going to choose the latter. This is really interconnecting short stories about this town and about the people's lives in this town and about why they flee to Saha, which is just like a building complex. People don't live in the building complex. They're all basically like squatters, but they've formed a community and only certain people can squat. Like anybody can squat, but they give out the keys to people and stuff, so you have to go through a process to get in there. You fall down in your luck and you're going to be homeless, you run and you go to Saha. And there's clearly a metaphor for the people that society moves on from, that forgets, that persecutes, that mistreats, women that need abortions, men who have gone to jail and can't get another chance, people whose parents have died and they just grow up poor with no other option. And we just talk about how these people ended up as social outcasts. Such a different novel to Kim Ji-yeon, born 1982. I think that you could read Kim Ji-yeon and you just cannot mistake it for the feminist book that it is, and it's like refreshingly simple and thought-provoking. Whereas Saha is a completely different novel. It's far more complex. I think that many reviewers will not get it. I always hate it when people say that. It's like the ultimate snobby thing. Did you get the book? Anybody who thinks that you didn't get the book is a dickhead. But there is the possibility for people not to get this book. That's what I more mean. I also don't think it's as good as Kim Ji-yeon. Doesn't feel like very focused. What I think would have made this a little bit better would be to maybe cut out 2 or 3 of the characters and to put in a little bit more detail about the other characters. While Kim Ji-yeon was very good at showing me the emotions of Kim and then layering them and building upon them, I didn't really get that in Saha. I didn't get that layering of emotions. I enjoyed this book, but after Kim Ji-yeon, this is really quite a big disappointment, I would have to say. Stay With Me, Ayobami Adebayo. This is the story of a woman who marries a man and can't get pregnant. Then the mother of the man starts to suggest, well, if you can't get pregnant, then we're going to have a second wife. And she's like, I don't want a second wife. And then this woman feels the pressure to have a child, and she starts to say that she's pregnant, and nobody believes her. And this woman's life is really quite tragic, and this is really a very sad story, to be honest. Some of these characters I feel quite exaggerated and stereotypical, especially, the mother pushing for grandchildren so hard. But that's all fine. These characters actually exist in the real world. It's one of these plots that if this was a memoir, you would say if it was fiction, you wouldn't believe it. But I guarantee you that this exact plot has happened to people before. I guarantee you that this is all picked from real life. It just doesn't quite feel believable. It just feels a little bit too unlikely. As far as writing is concerned, this is relatively simple prose and quite nice. I feel like it could have been a little bit more emotionally evocative. It's very emotional topics, and this is the debut novel from an author, and I'm very excited to read her second novel. It does read a little bit like a debut novel. There are just a few little kinks that would make this book so much better. I think it really lacks that subtlety of emotion is what it's really lacking. Everything felt like a real hammer blow. I read this little short one, and this is How to Stay Alive. This is a Kenyan novel. It's about 100 pages long. I'm just going to put it down because it's a bit shiny. It is Afrofuturism. I think that I have a collection of people who identify as fantasy readers, who also like to do things like read the books off the Woman's Prize and dive into a little bit of emotionally evocative literature. This is a you book. This is the story of a woman. Her brother commits suicide, and she travels to her aunt, and her aunt gives her a potion that allows her to travel back in time, and she tries to save his life. It is quite confusing in its narrative. I feel like the chapters are a little bit too short and it jumps a little bit too often. I think the book should have been maybe a bit longer or not quite as broken up. There is also quite a bit of Swahili in this book, and when I was Googling what these words meant, I could not find them, and I don't know whether, I assume all of these are phonetic words, so however the author has spelt them is not how Google is spelling them, and I found it very difficult to determine what they were. I enjoyed this book so much more when I gave up trying to figure out what those words were and just looked at the context in which they were written, even though sometimes that was pretty much impossible to do. As a novel, this is a fantasy which has a huge theme around grief. It's got LGBT themes all the way through it, and it is really about how this girl is dealing with the grief of her brother and about why the brother killed himself. And it's quite powerful and impactful like that. I personally, I really struggled with the stop-start nature. I found it too fast-paced. I think if you read a lot more fantasy, you won't have that issue. I think that it's a terrific book. It didn't quite work for me, but I don't like when I don't enjoy a good book and saying, I didn't like it, and people are like, oh, I'm not going to read that book because you didn't like it. I'm like, no, this is not what I'm saying. And listen to the reasons why I didn't like it. If that's a concern for you, we're all different readers, and I'm not insulted if I say that the book is about grief and you're like, I don't feel that I'm in a place where I can read about grief. I don't think that that's a big deal. Like, yeah, you're not going to enjoy the same book that I enjoyed. Well, so what? There's another book that you have enjoyed that I haven't enjoyed because I like a certain pace of the novel or whatever. I think that it's important that we really listen to each other about why we don't like a book instead of just going, did you like it? Because I didn't really like this book, but it is a really, really good book and people really should read it. But if you don't like fast pace and you don't like jumpy narratives, that's going to be a concern for you. I finished Wildflowers by Peggy Fu. Fru to rhyme with Drew. This is a story about three sisters. It's an Australian story. The youngest sister is a recovered heroin addict who is now pill jumping, and the eldest sister takes her away to far north Queensland to detox without her knowing that she is detoxing. I really enjoyed the middle sister in this. She is depressed in a way that I really just understand. In the opening scenes of this book, she goes, it was time to eat dinner. What was she going to eat? She had a look. She had a pan on the washstand. She picked it up. She picked up the spatula. She cracked an egg into it. She fried it. She ate it out of the pan, and then she put it back on the washstand. What was the point of washing it? She was just going to do the same thing. She has thoughts like, oh, I used to be good looking, and if I got a haircut and dyed the grey out, I'd still be quite attractive, but I'm not going to do that. And it's clear that she would like to be better looking and like to have that done, and it's not a rejection on society's beauty standards. It's just a can't be asked with it. And her depression and how she deals with her life was so much more interesting than the storyline of her younger sister. I felt like she was a much better drawn character. And this sort of comes into my ambivalent feel for this book, because I felt like this middle sister was done really well. I didn't really feel like the other sisters were, and the youngest sister, who is heroin addicted, had a traumatic event in her childhood where she got locked in a car boot. She was stuck, and the passerby came by and heard her banging and helped her get out and got her to safety. And we never find out why that happened. We never find out whether it was, did she crawl into the car boot and have it locked on her, or was somebody abusing her and put her in there? Did somebody play a trick on her? She was out playing with her friend, and we're like, do we suspect her friend? That's quite metaphorical for how distant this character felt. I mean, she made up about a third of the storyline. I felt like the author understood these characters and knew the backstory, but I felt like she didn't communicate that to you. I will probably read more from this author, though. I would definitely give Peggy Frew another shot. I think there was more display of talent in this novel. It just wasn't quite as consistent. I've been saving Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson for the end. I've got a real gripe with this booktube. Why has nobody reviewed this book yet? Why is nobody in my subscription circle talking about this book? Do you know when you read 2 or 3 bad books in a row, or even just average books in a row, and you just go to a safe author, an author that you know is going to be a 4-star or a 5-star read. Somebody with a proven track record, and you turn over the first pages and you're a chapter in, and you have this like safe feeling. You're just like, I know that whatever you're doing now, there's going to be a reason for it. I felt safe with Black Cake. The thing that Charmaine Wilkinson does really well is she has these individual stories going on, and there's quite a lot of them. There's quite a lot of things going on, and you almost sort of look at it at some point and you go, well, I feel quite comfortable with all these things happening. She's able to just build quite a lot quite easily. This is the story of a woman who has died. She has left a video recording, and her 2 children are watching it with her lawyer at before her funeral sort of thing. She's just recounting her life, and she's lived a really interesting life. She grew up on the island, which is clearly Jamaica, but it's never actually said. At some point she moves to the UK, and at some point she moves to North America. It's unclear whether it's Canada or the USA. I think it might actually be Canada. And this is something I really liked about it, that you had these 3 settings, and it was clearly talking about people from the Caribbean, how they form this diaspora in other countries, and how they're treated, and how there are differences between somebody from the Caribbean and then somebody, a UK Caribbean person and a US Caribbean person, and there are subtle differences in the way that they are treated by their societies, and there are subtle differences in the racism that goes on in there, and that is all addressed. And even to the point where on the island one of the characters is Chinese, and this is apparently a thing in Jamaica, that they had a lot of East Asian immigrants that were almost seen as the underclass at the time, and they all ended up owning shops, and then it ended up being the business class. And this is reflected in the story. I mean, obviously racism is a big part of this book, but I think much more of this book is about family. I think this is about connections and the importance of children, how this mother-child relationship is, but also about this woman's life. She has made these very powerful friendships, and ultimately at the heart of this woman's life is this lie. There is a deception going on. She is not the woman she has lived as, and she is coming clean about it. This is just so bloody good. This is a really, really fantastic novel. Trying to articulate why this is so good is not quite getting across the magnificent level of skill that this author has used in her debut novel. She has intersected themes of racism and feminism and class in with family and love and friendship and oceans and cooking and surfing. I loved the depiction of racism through sport, and how some sports are deemed okay for black people to participate in and other sports are not. Kind of like the depiction of the working world into nursing is a job for women and construction is a job for men. It's just one of these books that has faithfully depicted characters and sceneries and experiences in such a way that you cannot help but to get something good out of this. Brother-sister relationships, mother-daughter, mother-son, best friends, relationships between loved ones, LGBT relationships, domestic violence. Violence against women is a theme in this as well. Rape. So much in this book, and so well done. Really, other than check the trigger warnings, there's a few. Not that it's a super dark book, but I don't really see who would not like this book. This is just a talented author producing a good book. This is, I guarantee you that you will give this book 4 or 5 stars and just, it's booktube. Talk about this book, read this book, review this book. It is wow. Well, that's all the books that I've read. Let me know how you're going. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books. If you want to pick up any of these books, pick up Black Cake. I mean, pick up Olive Grove in Ends, and there's a bunch of good books here. Actually, this has been a really good reading 10 books for me. Legitimately would recommend all of these books. Legitimately happy that I read all of these books. Even the books that I have picked on, I actually feel like a lot of these books are better quality than my experience for them. And yeah, it's been a great reading time. So I hope that your last 10 books were as good as these 10 books were for me. Or your next 10 books. Yeah, I hope that your next 10 books are. Anyway, I'm just talking around in circles now. Like, comment, subscribe. Have a nice day. And here's another video. Click on it if you're not trying to, just do that.